every cult and every tyranny begins with the undermining of the parental authority.
Yes, this was very interesting.
And because we grew up in a cult, and I was trying to think back.
Hello and welcome to the Brothers Random Show. My name is Travis.
I'm Michael.
And we are two ordinary brothers discussing extraordinary ideas and some random shit. Michael, why are we here?
Today we are talking about Exodus 9 commentary, episode 9 commentary, the seminars that Jordan Peterson has done, where he brings a bunch of people together and they all discuss, they go through chapter by chapter, verse by verse, the Exodus book in the Old Testament. And
it turns out that a book is more durable than stone. It's more durable than a castle. It's more durable than an empire.
The way it's structured, this law, then in the New Testament, Christ resumes it to one saying. Love God, love your neighbor. That's it. That's the law. The whole law is that.
And the question is then, what's the spirit of the law? The fundamental spirit of the law. That's what this book is trying to sort out.
That we need God is a given. Does God need us?
Judaism says that you're supposed to both fear God and love God, right? And how do you do both of those things at the same time?
The thing you value enough to make sacrifices for, of any sort, that's your God.
And let's get into it. This one is mostly about the 10 Commandments. I think they get about halfway through, but really great discussions here too.
We should give a little bit of our background. Michael and I both grew up on a Mormon polygamous compound, for lack of a better word. We've since kind of left Mormonism, but still believe that religion and religiosity is important in our lives and in our children's lives and probably in everybody's lives. So we both really like Jordan Peterson's take on most Bible things because he really grounds it in a psychological way. What was the first topic that you wanted to talk about, Michael?
Well, I mean, along those lines, you kind of opened with that. One thing that Dennis Prager says in this discussion is, and Dennis Prager, for those who don't know, he's had radio shows for years now.
Radio host, yeah,
radio host. And he said that he'd get people all the time. They would call in. They say, "I'm not religious like you. I believe in science." And he would say, "Oh, really? So my religion tells me to love God and my neighbor. What has science taught you?"
Well, he also says not to murder anyone too. What?
Oh, yeah.
Does science tell you not to murder? Because if you go off of science, it's survival of the
fittest. Maybe you should murder.
Maybe you should murder.
You probably should go kill someone.
So you can gain their whatever they have.
Nowadays it wouldn't work, because nowadays we have structures in place that if you murder somebody, you're going to spend the rest of your life in jail or be murdered yourself or killed yourself, whatever. Like the structures, but it always gets me when they're just like, well, we have structures that would, keep you from allowing that to be a good thing for society.
And
it's nice that we have those structures, but if those structures aren't there, what have you got?
Because science says the opposite. Science says, well, science doesn't give you morality. And that's really what he's referring to here, is like science. You can believe in science and still have a moral base. But if you only believe in science, there's no moral basis. Like that, what keeps you from being the survival of the fittest, which is essentially what would happen if we didn't have society kind of holding people up to a higher standard. Driving is one of the perfect examples of this. So you're driving down the road. What keeps you from just swerving all over the place, running into other cars and just driving over people, right? the only thing that keeps you from doing that is a sense of morality and a law that keeps you from doing that, right? There's a law. If you do this, you're going to get pulled over, you're going to get ticketed, all this kind of stuff. But as a society, we've decided that you're driving this way and the other car's driving this way, and you're going by each other. You're not going to swerve into the other traffic while that car's coming at you. As a society, we've decided that that's important, and we've made this moral basis. But if you're just going off of science, then why do I have to drive in between the lines? Why not drive all over the road? There's no moral basis, that nothing tells you, maybe your own, self-reliance tells you, oh, I shouldn't do that because then I'm going to wreck and die in a car accident, but it's interesting to me to look at this and see that see that morality is what society kind of makes it, right? And we've lost a lot of our morality. That's why Star Wars can't have a light side and a dark side anymore. It's all about perspective, right?
I mean, the best parts about Star Wars is there is no good or evil. It depends on what side you're standing on, truly. You know what I mean?
Morality has taken a kind of a back seat in our society. When you got like Lil Nas X like grinding against the devil or whatever like that, that kind of shit is, we're losing the narrative of morality at this point, I would say. Well, which is why there's anything goes, right?
Right. People think they can get rid of the substructure of why the rules are there, and like they can throw that out and still enjoy the rules, right?
Yeah.
But you can. In our day and age, like you can do that, but
everything's breaking down.
That's now we're starting to see this seeping through thing happening where now you can't even tell somebody what a woman is, right? It's just we've kind of lost the way so badly. We just don't even know where we're at anymore.
Have you heard of the fence analogy? I forget who originated this, but there's a fence, and a group of people come to the fence, and they look around and they're like, "Why is this fence here?" Right? And they go, "Okay, well, we don't know why the fence is here, so we're going to get rid of the fence." They get rid of the fence, and then when the cattle from the other side of the fence show up, they're on the other side of the fence, so they're strewn all over the place, and it's kind of chaos. And they didn't know, the person who showed up didn't know that didn't see any cattle around, so they decided to get rid of the fence when in fact the fence was there to keep the cattle in from getting on the other side.
I've heard it described as the difference between liberals and conservatives is the liberals show up, they see a fence, they're like, why is this fence here? Get rid of the fence. And conservatives show up and they see a fence and they're like, there must be a reason there's a fence here. And they leave it.
And they leave it. So it's essentially the same idea as, like, if you don't know why something's working out, like you said, why get rid of the substructure? We've gotten rid of we're in a society now that's gotten rid of the substructure, right? There is no moral basis. It's all about perspective. It's all about how you were raised. It's all so there's no morality in society anymore. And so we're, like you said, now nobody can decide on what a woman is. They like to call them what are birthing persons or whatever. It's such a dumb, and the lunatics have taken over the asylum essentially. With that
they kind of jump around talking about different commandments at different, and sometimes others are like, hey guys, let's try to keep this succinct. There's probably a reason that they're the way they are.
Yeah. And Prager makes this puts this out. He says, if they do talk a little bit about prophets at the beginning of the episode, and Dennis goes, if a bona fide real prophet showed up in our midst, in our country, they would put him down as misinformation.
Yeah.
So and Dennis always kind of gets into the political when the other gentleman
The
there
others kind of stay away from it.
Yeah, he's kind of stay away from it, but he likes to wade into that water. But and I thought that was interesting because so the LDS Church does believe we have a prophet. I don't feel like tearing that belief down, but I do wonder how the leader of the LDS Church sees himself. Does he see himself as a prophet? I often find myself thinking along those lines. Like, does he think that he actually has access to God and God's will? I mean, he's been in the LDS Church all of his life. He may not have the perspective of, well, the prophet isn't really talking directly to God. He's just a man, right? That's what I've always come back to with the LDS Church is like, even though he's the leader of the church and they consider him a prophet, does he actually believe that he has direct access to God? Or are we just kind of following the whims of a man who I would argue that's probably godly. He probably, is a good man, I would say. He's a leader of a massive church. Like, what do you think when it comes to that? Because I find myself thinking about the LDS prophet. Well, in polygamy,
I mean,
we have the one mighty and strong, the one man-itis, right? When you and I talk about this a lot.
I think anytime you have an organization where you have the one man-itis,
all the power,
that's a
the
problem.
Power goes to one person.
Personally, I'm just nothing against Catholics, but like we had Nathan Diltz on, and we talked about this a little bit. But the Catholics say that the Pope is the one person that is the God's mouthpiece on earth, and none of them believe it. And Mormons say that their prophet is human, and none of them believe it.
Yeah.
Is human and has human frailties, and could be wrong, and doesn't believe it.
And they don't believe it. They don't believe that.
It's just it's the built in the culture is just different of how they're working out the one man-itis. And I got problems with one man-itis because we grew up with that and saw the problems for what they were.
Yeah.
And
because even with the one man-itis, one of the biggest problems with one man-itis, and this might go back to like the Moses story, one of the biggest problems with one man-itis is that so you'll have a good man ruling for a long time, and then he passes, and then you pass the torch to his son, who's a piece of garbage, who's not good at it and can't hack it. That was the issue with Marcus Aurelius and his son Commodus. That was the issue with Moses. I don't think he didn't pass the torch to his sons.
No, he passed it to Joshua.
But see, that's the issue in Mormonism or polygamy sects, is that they pass it to their sons, and even though
they don't pass it to their sons, they pass it to whoever.
Not all of them. That's the Warren Jeffs passed it to the son. It was like
monarchy. But that's not a prerequisite. It's whoever they choose
before they die.
Well,
Joseph Smith didn't choose Brigham Young, though.
That's a whole different deal. But as secession goes, they choose
before they die.
Well, the church does it a little different. The church it goes to the next highest in line on the Council of the 12.
Yeah,
that's how it goes in the church. But the polygamous groups, I don't know about all of them, but the one that we grew up in, they get to choose before they die who gets to be the next one.
To be the next one.
And rarely ever is it their kid. The one we grew up in, I guess there's 2 times. There was two Woolies and there was 2 Smiths. So I think that's it. I'm trying to remember back.
I just found it interesting when they were talking about prophets, because one of the people actually claims that anybody can be a prophet. It doesn't have to be somebody, a religious leader, because one of them claims that Abraham Lincoln was a prophet, because he was basically saying prophetic things.
He was being prophetic. He was being like had a vision and was
for the
willing
country,
to fight for that and take a people to that, right? To that vision,
to actually have real freedom for everyone in this country. That was fascinating, because the commander in chief has actually gotten way too much power, but there was a separation of powers on purpose when our country was built. And we kind of gotten away from that because there's way too much power given to the president of the United States these days. But the whole
it's
point,
like we're voting for a king.
That's really what it feels like.
And then because he's got so much power, he's able to sway things too much, and we shouldn't be. So but man, we're getting off in the weeds. So let's get back the 10 Commandments. So and they do talk about this. They talk about it in light of like a vertical line and a horizontal line. Which, if you think about it being in a cross, which is pretty cool. Like if it
symbolism.
Comes into a cross, it's very symbolic. But
so there's the 5 that go to God, 5 commandments that go to God.
Yep.
And then there's 5 that go to men on earth, right?
Yes. And this is pointed out by Jesus, and it's coolest stories that I think that of Jesus is when they ask Jesus, what is the greatest of the laws?
The Pharisees are trying to entrap him.
To entrap Jesus. What are the greatest of the laws? And they were trying to just get him to say one, and then they could
arrest him for
just like, oh well, that's not the greatest of the law, this is the greatest of the law, right? And so they were trying to entrap him with it, and he basically sums up the 10 Commandments in 2 laws, which is love God, love man. And like and he says, and upon this lies all the law and all of the prophets.
Yes.
So
the first 5 are meant to praise God.
That are meant, for you to love God with all thy heart, might, mind, and strength. So that is, you shall have no other gods before me. 1, you shall not make idols before me, which is 2. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God's name in vain. Which we should get into that.
I get into that one.
Prager was right on with. People think that is swearing,
cursing,
and it's
I don't finish those last.
So 4, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. That's God's day, right? 5, and I loved how they kind of talked about how 5 is kind of an intermediary, right? It's kind of like an in between
and so is 10.
Thou shalt not covet.
No, they
and so is 10.
They encompass. They affirm the first 4 is how one of them explained it. They affirm the first 4.
So honor thy father and thy mother. And one of the things I thought was interesting was like, it's like if you can't, and even if you had a horrible father, there's a something about, and Jordan talks about this, where he had he read a book where the guy had a horrible father, but in the mornings he was a drunk. In the mornings before he was a drunk, he was actually a good father, and he remembered, and he decided to remember those good things about his father.
That's very difficult to do when you've got a tyrannical father. That is really hard to do for people, because people naturally do not notice the positives. They always notice the negatives of other people. And I mean, it's obviously something I struggle with, because I don't have any good memories of dad. So,
but like, that's also life, right? It's also just life can be tough, and you can remember all the horrible, tough things about life, or you can be grateful for those horrible, tough things and enjoy life, right? Like, it's kind of the same thing. I'm not poo-pooing people who have horrible parents, but but anyway, and so
well, let's talk about
those are the 5, and those are about love God with all thy heart, mind, and strength.
Let's talk about the third one, because this is a real bugaboo in LDS
Mormonism.
Mormonism.
Yeah.
So Mormonism, for those that aren't aware, and you can easily look this kind of stuff up, Mormons do not believe in cursing at all. Like, no damn, no hell, no fuck, no none of that. They don't. And the mother of all curses is the Lord's name in vain, which is considered to be the worst. And we both grew up in this situation where, you can't say God damn, you can't say God, oh God, or anything
Jesus
like that.
Christ. Like,
Jesus Christ.
It was always looked down on.
It's very
Christ.
looked down on. It's very,
oh God. Yeah.
And I still have issues with it today. I mean, this is ingrained in my brain. So I still do not allow my children to do this.
But me too. Like, I tell my daughter, like, we don't say oh God, because when we talk about God, we talk with reverence. Now, am I maybe I'm being a horrible parent because I'm trying to teach my kids to have some
respect for the
respect
divinity,
for and authority, right, or something along those lines, right?
But Peterson's talked about this in the past. So Peterson's always talked about this. This commandment is not about your words. This commandment is about your deeds. And the Catholic Church has done this in the past. The Catholic Church has been known to murder people in the name of
God.
God. And this is what the Crusades were all about. This is what this has been going on for a millennia. The Catholic Church isn't the only one either. We're going to take these people out because they are a different religion than we are, because God said so. That is using God's name in vain.
What can I do towards my own ends and call it God's? God wants this.
Yes.
For my own ends, right?
Yeah, so
stamping
it's
God's.
It's what your desires are.
You would say God is.
Yes.
Is
it's what your desires are, and you say it's God's. That's when you use His name in vain.
Right. Yeah,
It's
and then you go and do that thing, and like, oh well, God wanted this,
tithing,
when really you wanted it. Yeah.
Tithing in the LDS Church is a big issue because it makes the church wealthy. And they've always said that it's meant to build temples and all that kind of stuff. But the truth is it's actually made them one of the wealthiest churches. So tithing is one of these things that they're saying is God, but it smacks of a little bit of, oh, we need money to do these things. We're going to use God. You must give to us to give to God. It's a little bit of like indulgences back in the Dark Ages. In the Dark Ages, nobody could read Scripture, so they had to rely on the church to read to them Scripture, and then to be forgiven of their sins, they would give money to the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church would absolve them of their sins. This was what was known as indulgences. And that is purely God's name in vain. We're getting money off of and saying that this is what God wants. We're gaining monetary gain and saying God wants this. That is God's name in vain. It's not words, it's deeds. It's not, you're not, and the LDS church might have something there, whereas like maybe we should say God's name with reverence. But Prager points out that the word God is not God's name. And so
because apparently on his show he would say oh God a lot,
yes.
And like people would call in and get after him for it,
because religious people, they're like, hey,
and
why are you doing
he's like, well, first off, like God isn't his name.
That's not Elohim.
And second off is that's not what the scripture's talking about. Now, and so now but for me, when I'm teaching my kids that, I'm not thinking, oh, taking the Lord's name in vain. I'm not thinking the 10 commandment. I'm just thinking I want to teach my kids to have some respect around talking about this,
the divine,
the divine. Yeah. Right. So I just, that's what I want to teach my kids, is to have a respect for that.
Yeah.
Now but I do not conflate it as, breaking one of the 10 commandments. If you swear like that or something like that. So
yeah, it is interesting how the church has kind of morphed over the years for this, to the point where most really staunch LDS people do not go see rated R movies. They've taken it to its to a heightened level. And I got nothing against them believing that, but this is a more in-depth reading of that commandment. Because I would say, because there's been people who have actually killed in the name of God, and that's using his name in vain.
And one thing I didn't, I don't think they talk about keeping the Sabbath day holy very much in this episode, but I wanted to mention
they do later in the episode.
Yeah, I wanted to mention it a little bit because I mean, that put this people separate from all other people, for them to have
a day of rest,
for
even their animals, for even their
animals, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, anyway, I just thought that was interesting and wanted to point that out. But
they go into it later and they talk a little bit about, is having fun, on the day of rest, the same thing as giving a day to God, essentially. And they all kind of mull this over in their own ways, because Jordan, he claims that he has a hard time stopping work, like he's always kind of. And then Dennis said that he had the opportunity to go to his favorite baseball game with really great tickets, or playoffs, that happened on a Sunday, and he's like, or on during
for him it would have been a
Saturday evening.
Yeah.
And he, because he's Jewish, and he was like, no, I'm not going to break this covenant, because I'm supposed to give this day to God. So I'm supposed to be also worshiping and spending time with my family. He says he plays a lot of games with the family when they do that. And that's probably a better way to spend your Sundays than to go to a baseball game, or that kind of thing, because the commandment isn't necessarily this is a day of rest. It's also a day of that you give to God. So you're supposed to be worshiping God in that day. That's why people go to church and stuff like that.
And I mean, it's nice to have community, especially to do that with. I think there's something to that. And it's with people leaving, it seems like in our nation, we've had a rise in spiritualism, but just a fall in active.
Well, it's a fall in community.
Religious.
I would say it's just a fall in community. Nobody's doing communal things with each other anymore. Not, the closest thing you're going to get maybe is a concert or like a sporting event or something like that, where the community comes together.
Possibly. I mean, but I saw an asterisk that was showing the rise of young men joining religious organizations.
Well, and I think
like
for young men, like it goes back to purpose. We're seeking purpose in our lives. And if you've already done the thing of like going after money or going after women, he's like, those end up being kind of shallow pursuits. And maybe men are coming back to like, hey, maybe I need something higher in my life.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, some meaning.
They talk, this is so interesting. They talk about honor thy father and thy mother. Dennis Prager says this is kind of a natural law as well, because bad parents cause children's to commit death on themselves, right?
Yeah,
Manson's children, he had a son that killed himself. And so he talks about that, but bad children don't cause the other way around for parents to off themselves. And it was just an interesting concept because they say that in the commandment, it's so your days will be long upon the land.
One thing that when talking about honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may long on the land, Prager points out that every cult and every tyranny begins with the undermining of the parental authority.
Yes, this was very interesting.
And because we grew up in a cult, and I was trying to think back. Undermines the parental authority. And
so we've gone into some of these. So the Moonies, and they would tell their new congregants that they needed to cut off all access to their parents. They were getting young people on university campuses and stuff like that. So and this is a common thing with cults, because when you cut off the rationale in your life, you're susceptible to all forms of influence and chaos.
Cutting out dissenters, right?
Yeah.
It's a cutting. I think it's a cutting out of dissenters, people who are going to question, right? But it's not just that. Okay, now hear me out, because I was thinking about this. The one we grew up in would do a little bit to kind of get you to separate yourself from people who were not part of the group, the religion. But it wouldn't do a ton. It did a little bit, but it wasn't super strict on making sure. Now the Jeff's group, man, those guys would do everything they could to keep you from talking to anybody outside of the religion. And some of those kids, you hear them tell about how they haven't talked to their mom in like years.
Yeah.
The group we grew up in does that a little bit, but not a ton. It's not really over. And so I'm great, and I'm grateful for that. Because I still have good relationships with people who are still in it. And when I was in it, I still had good relationships with people who were not out of it. So that's good. I like that. But one thing that they would do, and this is, I think, indicative of the LDS church as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that is that a father's authority is kind of neutered when compared to the authority of the priesthood that goes up above
The hierarchy.
from the hierarchy, the bishop, the stake president, the prophet, right? So the
father's authority is lessened,
yes,
comparatively to the church authority.
And
that's interesting.
I would say, and the mother's authority is lessened even more right now, because the father, he's got the priesthood.
This is any
this
religious organization then, right?
So
they're kind of pushing against this commandment, right? Because if you were to honor your father and your mother, they would be the most authority in your life, the furthest most authority in your life, other than maybe God. And if you've got a guy saying that he speaks for God, then you've just pulled
the authority away from the parents in the family.
Yes, yeah.
And they've put the authority on this guy that is speaking for God.
Says he's speaking for God.
And well, this goes to wokeism as well, because now we've got kids in schools that are being told that they shouldn't tell their parents about their coming out.
Oh yeah,
as transgender. Like there's this whole thing now where the fight is to allow kids to transition without their parents knowing.
Yes.
Like
that's cult. That's a cult.
It's bad. It's bad.
So this is interesting, because this is kind of a hedge against cultism, is honor thy father and thy mother, because what your father and mother are going to do is, like, we've already been through this process of being, love bombed by the cult, right? And so if we and we've also got our frontal lobe fully developed, so we're looking at the negativity of the cult, and so we can point that out. So like you tell your child who's like 18 years old and going, oh, I'm gonna go off into this cult because they tell me that this is the true church or whatever you want to call it. And then the parents go, oh, hold on a second, what about all these negatives that this has? The kids aren't going to see that negative, because one, their frontal lobe isn't fully developed, and two, they're getting love bombed by this cult. That's what the love bombing comes from. The everybody goes, oh, come over here and help us out. So I mean, this is like a hedge against cultism. This is like the perfect example of that.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, your father and your mother could join a cult.
Yeah.
And then it's like, but the thing is it's not saying believe every word they say. It's not saying love them unconditionally, right?
Yeah.
It's saying honor them, right? So I don't know. I'm not sure if it's, a direct hedge against cults or cultism. But it is interesting I loved that statement. And I thought about that statement. I've thought about that statement a lot since he said it, or since I heard him say it. And it's just like, oh, well, interesting.
Imagine you going off to war and you have a general who's 16 years old. And you have a general who's 50 years old. Which one are you more likely to get wisdom from?
Right. There should be a respect for just for like the elderly, for people who have been there. I love Gary V will talk about Gary Vaynerchuk he'll talk about how, like, we need to go talk to old people more.
Yeah.
Like just go talk to an old person and ask them about like their
What was it
life
like?
and
Yeah.
what was it like back when, right?
That there is wisdom to be gleaned from the elderly, and I think that might be what is playing into this commandment, is that if you honor them, like when you're a child, you have all this gusto and bravado, and you want to get into it, and you want to, you know, and the parent is more likely to go look at the situation and go, well, this, if you drive this fast, you're going to get into an accident. And, you know, if you, you know, slow down, don't be so.
A lot of it's because I've been there.
Yeah, because
right. A lot of it's because I've been there. I drove.
I've seen this happen. Yeah, I drove too fast.
You know, I hit
somebody.
ice on a bridge.
Yeah,
you know, you know, all those things, right?
It's the wisdom. It's the wisdom of old age. You know, it's the wisdom of being, of living a life, right? And this is probably one of our biggest problems in our society, is that there's too many young people basically being told that they know more than everybody else. You know, Greta Thunberg, you know, she's a 14-year-old that knows everything there is to know about society.
We're gonna praise her, and we're gonna put her up on this pedestal, and she is the one to listen to because
her future is
because her future, and she cries, and and listen to the kids. They want to transition. We need to listen to them, right? Like, so this
and it's
switch
like,
to,
because the Spartans kind of did this with the oracles of Delphi. They were young girls who are basically predicting the future. And in the movie 300, Leonidas kind of looks and he's like, I'm not going to let what a prepubescent girl tell me how to govern my, you know,
which he probably didn't really say, but it makes for a good film.
Makes for a good movie. But the whole point is that you know, we shouldn't be listening to the youth, because the youth haven't lived a life, and we have. And so, and can they have their own moments of clarity and brilliance? Yes, that's very possible. But
it's interesting to see where the wisdom comes in this and where it goes wrong, right? The wisdom comes in this is that when you have a child and they see the world and it's just this amazing thing, and they're just like so amazed by it. I mean, my little girl just yesterday was sliding down her slide with her chicken. And she was just having so much fun with this chicken. And the chicken is just kind of like there for the ride. Right? With it. She's going back up and going down the slide with holding her chicken. And it's just, you know, so sometimes you look and you're just like, yes, life is a wonder and it's amazing. And our children can remind us of that. Right. But like,
but we also have to, but we
driving fast on ice. I mean, come on. I've been there. Don't do it.
Don't do it. Right. Listen to me.
But there's also, there's some, but the society wants to look at that and like, oh, this awe of being a child, and the world is this playground, and
we must give everything to them.
Now we need to give them the reins. Now let's give them the reins to society and allow them to make all the decisions. And you want to be a different gender? Yeah, go ahead. We'll give you all these pills and chop things off.
Yeah.
Or sew things up and pull them out. You know, it's just like, okay. No. Whoa.
Now we need to get back to respecting the traditions that have come before, because when you break those down at your own risk.
I mean, liberals and conservatives. Liberals look at the fence and they're like, this shouldn't be here. Get rid of the fence. Conservatives, there's a
What was
fence
this
here.
here for?
Probably a good reason it's here. Let's not mess with it. So
anything else you want to get into?
I personally, I think that that's why it's good for us to discuss, right?
Yeah.
Because it's good for us both to look at the fence, and it's good for us to say, well, it's probably a good reason for this to be here. And then it's good for liberals to say, well, we don't think it should be here, right? And then for us to discuss it. Okay, maybe like prohibition. So like there's so liberals would say that this is a fence that needs to be taken down.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And it's like, this is not working. This is a fence, needs taken down. And then, conservatives being like, oh no, but we really should mandate this morality of not drinking alcohol. No, we really should. And then, I mean, eventually it was just like, no, we should get rid of this fence. It doesn't work. So we should get rid of this fence. Okay, cool. Now, and moving on from that, right?
Prohibition.
I'm just using that as an example of like
prohibition.
So there might be fences that need to be taken down, and there might be fences that need to stay up. That's why we needed to be able to discuss. We could probably think of lots of examples for the right side. Hey, let's keep this fence here.
Yeah.
Like, decriminalizing all drugs. Yeah, but it hasn't been working out too well.
Yeah, it hasn't been. Oregon hasn't been working out for Oregon.
Maybe we should keep this fence up. Prager brought up that Freud said, how you see your father is how you will see God.
If you have a negative feeling towards your father, you will have negative feelings towards God.
And I'm not sure. I wonder if, because I heard, and I don't know how true this is, but I heard that the Columbine shooters had really bad relationships with their fathers.
Yeah. Or non-existent.
Non-existent relationships with their fathers.
Yeah. Well, and that's common among school shooters, actually. They don't have present fathers in their lives. Mm-hmm. So, and that's according to the book, The Boy Crisis. I don't know. Do you want to wrap this up?
Sure. I think Jesus put it best, and this is probably why I'm a Jesus lover and I'm a Christian, but I think he put it best. Love God with all thy heart, might, mind, and strength, and love thy neighbor as thyself. Upon this is all the law and all the prophets.
Check us out on social media, Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Just look for The Sword in the Skull. If you're listening to this and not watching it, please go to YouTube and like, share, and subscribe. Keep reading, keep listening, keep watching, learn more. We'll see you, brother.
See ya.